I'm so grateful for the kind introduction and for the opportunity to be here. This was a late-breaking invite to be here. Not to be totally conspiratorial, but I kind of think this is show and tell for investors. Like the founders of Pletly, who have been so incredibly innovative in thinking through this convening in New Cortland, I think they wanted to show you that there was an actual live investor in the room, living and breathing. Message received. Message received. But there's some part of me that won't be as entertaining or energetic as Alex Drain from this morning. I don't have slides, but what I can bring you is the message of good news about what is happening outside these walls. Enable Ventures is the first impact venture capital firm to invest in closing the disability wealth gap. What is disability? Disability is a natural part of the human experience. And yet, until now in the capital markets, we really haven't had recognition of that human experience. We're talking about an impact on a population of 1.5 billion people in the world. In the United States, that's 1 in 4 American adults. Globally, that's 1 in 6 people. There was an interesting statistic that I learned along the way, and that is that across the world, only 1 out of 10 people with disabilities have the technology that they utterly need to remove critical barriers in their lives. What we have today globally is nearly 2/3 of working age adults not, in fact, fully engaged in work. Let me just take a moment and let's think about that. What that means as a global issue is there is nearly a $2 trillion hole in the global GDP where disability talent should be, where inclusively designed products, universally designed solutions should rest, should live in our marketplace. What has happened is instead of innovation, we have had a long history of capital investment in a charitable model of services that has helped families with critical care and support, no doubt. But in the absence of any other type of capital, we have not seen over the last 100 years what we are about to see now and moving forward. We have had something socially, economically, and culturally that I would refer to as a revolution. One that has begun by and for and with the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990 in the United States, and acts and laws across the world in our lifetime that have revolutionized the civil and human rights of people with disabilities. There is a moment happening right now where those of us that are working in this space, and it's all of us, not those of us, have understood that those rights have bestowed an economic reality too. And in the preamble to the Americans with Disabilities Act, there was somewhat of a prayer. There were the 4 goals of the statute, and one of them was economic self-sufficiency. I had spent the first part of my life as a civil rights lawyer and enforcing the Americans with Disabilities Act at the Justice Department for the Attorney General. And I always knew that that word economic self-sufficiency was in the ADA. But what I could not understand, nor my brilliant colleagues, nor the families that we worked with in the field, or the well-intentioned and well-aligned service providers, or the healthcare systems, or the state and local governments, what we couldn't figure out is why we were 30+ years post-ADA and nearly 2/3 of working age adults with disabilities still remain not employed. How could we have the advantage of civil and human rights, but not economic rights? How could we have people with their highest aspirations matriculating from secondary school, post-secondary school, only to knock on the front door of employment and not have equal tools as other people to compete? And what we knew, and I hear it in this room, is that we know that economic self-sufficiency has a relationship that's causal and interrelated with health. We understand that to be true. But when we look at where we spent our capital as a society, not just here in the United States, but across the globe, we had an anemic amount of spend, both from public and private systems and private capital market investment, in tools that had to do with work, education, skills training, assistive technologies, in tools that were sustainable, that would last more than one season, in tools that were scalable, that would reach the statistic of the millions of people with unmet technology needs across the globe that wanted to compete in this economy. So at some point, I stopped being a civil rights lawyer and started to become an investor. Because what are rights, essentially, without remedies? What are rights in this world when people urgently need tools in their hands in order to manifest the full realization of those rights? And so Enable Ventures is part of a movement that is not led by Enable Ventures. It's led by the 1.5 billion people with disabilities on planet Earth today, people with intellectual, developmental, emotional, physical disabilities, people who are deaf, people who are blind, who are in search of highly inclusive, accessible technologies to compete on equal footing with their non-disabled peers. And what's interesting today in the capital markets is we're seeing an innovation not only in technology. There are hundreds of companies a year, like the fine companies that were on display in the lunchroom. In the United States market, there are hundreds of companies a year in the Western European market. There are hundreds of companies a year across the globe that are competing for access to capital. But their approach is fundamentally different and innovative. And that approach is a formative belief that as they access capital and scale at a market rate, that they will also scale their impact, that their values and their purpose, their essential alignment of purpose, is unshakable. What would be an example? There are many, many examples in this market where the way that companies create economics and scale is the way that they are creating a unit of service, a unit of impact, a captioning company that is providing a unit of communication. For every connected minute it's being paid. A mobility company that is creating, we have a mobility company in our marketplace that's creating millions of steps with its neurotechnology sleeve. And yet that is how the company is successfully scaling and growing its business model. We haven't seen innovations like this in finance in a generation. We have never seen quite what we are seeing today in the disability economy. And we can only expect that there is something even more interesting about this movement, and that is that it is not economic investment for people with disabilities. It is economic investment in people with disabilities ideas. It is designed with and led by and driven by the interests of founders with disabilities and those co-creating and co-designing, with the disability experience being centered as an asset, not as a cost, as value creation for society, not as deficit, as something that will grow and scale and drive tremendous potential across society, not as something that should be segregated or separated or in a cottage industry or in a separate lane. What we are seeing across the world is that there are aligned entrepreneurial support organizations who are coming to market as the new model of NGO, who are serving the next generation of entrepreneurs with disabilities who have great ideas. And those entrepreneurs with disabilities are makers and dreamers and innovators from this ADA generation who are making work tech and skills training tech and educational technology and next generation communication technology and mobility technology. And all of that technology has been the answer to their own prayers. They are driving innovations for the technology they wish they had but couldn't buy in the capital markets, wouldn't invest in before. What we've seen is a generation of people who are sick and tired of being sick and tired of waiting for the biggest technology companies in the world to send technology innovation down to the supply chain only to be remediated off the back end because it's inaccessible to the very people who need it the most. What we are seeing is the type of innovators who are stress testing product from the very beginning for the least amount of exclusion. And this is an innovation that is gifted from the disability community and their founders to the rest of the capital markets. To say, actually, somebody said it on this stage. When we designed for the edge case, I think that was you. When we designed for the edge case, for the hard case, the place where we have little room for error, the mobility device that can't pop off the curb, the neural sleeve that must work with fidelity to the end user or somebody will trip and fall. When we design for captioning in higher education, where the student who's deaf or hard of hearing needs the accuracy of the information in order to compete on equal ground, when we do those edge cases as innovators in this market, we convey extreme value to the rest of society, to the person with a learning disability who uses captioning for note-taking, to the person with short-term memory loss that uses the captioning. So what we're seeing in this marketplace is a value creation that's attached to human-centered design, inclusive design, and universal design. And embedded in the technology are not solutions in search of many problems. These are people who are building for themselves, for people that are centered at the core of why they're building and making and of the innovation. And what's really radical is that there's capital at the table that sees the market differentiation from those ideas. That there's capital that's in search of ideas that have market differentiation based on who built them. I have a great friend who says to me, the answer to what is inevitably who. Who builds something could be a designer or a maker or a dreamer who's co-creating and co-designing with the disability community. It could be somebody who's a builder who has a disability who's solving their hard edge case and conveying value to the rest of society. What we're most interested in at Enable Ventures is changing the front door to tech. Not the side door, not the back alley, not the cottage industry, not the special convening of accessibility specialists. We had a whole cottage industry created out of the very idea that we'd remediate other people's technology so that people with disabilities could at some point use it. Right now, at the front door of technology, the ideas with the most sophistication, the most elegance of design, are attracting the attention of capital investment and investors who see that it's a better business case to invest with particularity in products that more efficiently penetrate the consumer market. And the best products in the world, and I would submit the best designers in the world, are designing for those edge cases. They are creating technology that's built to exclude the least number of people, to maximize the potential of the most people, and to center people at the core of the design and of the solution. So I am delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation so much. It's been an honor, and I look forward to meeting all the companies that are here, and thank you so much.